Around in the flower or something? No, okay. Westmill, I hear older folks talk about it. I just don't know a lot about that one. This is Carper's, or Zion's Lutheran Church. When you go on a cemetery tour, we go back this lane here, park, and we have to walk up this hill into the cemetery. At the church sat right there on the side of that hill. And that's the center school at Westmill. Notice also again the number on the building. Near Roxbury? Strasburg. Okay. Well, then I'm having trouble again. I don't know what I'm doing with this thing. Survey crews began staking out boundary lines for Letterkenny Ordnance Depot on January 8, 1942. By the close of the month, houses that had just recently were used as houses and sheds that housed machinery were vacated and used by the government as temporary offices. The perimeter of the depot was enclosed with 23 miles of chain link fence. There is yet another farm-type fence on the very outside comprising 27 miles. And that's what is referred to as between the fences. There's a chain link, and then there's like, not a high tensile, but something similar to that on the very outside edge. In time, 902 ammunition storage igloos were built and covered with earth to minimize damage should an explosion occur. That is an early photo of igloos. Now, it's all grown up now around there. But the igloos against the mountain, and that's what the government was looking for that kind of protection. Today, I'm sure that doesn't matter near as much. Apparently this thing has to read it. Okay. In January of 1942, the government made an additional purchase of 1,223 acres near Culbertson, and that's what the lady was referring to here earlier this evening. They weren't in it at first, the Culbertson, but then they were. They wanted it for the rail connection. They wanted it for the access to Western Maryland Railroad. By February 9 of 1942, Ferguson and Edmondson of Pittsburgh had signed a contract with the Army to lay 30 miles of rail lines within the depot for the shipment of ammunition to the Eastern Docks by railroad. One day in the spring of 1942, 19-year-old Clyde H. Lehman spotted surveyors working in the 7-acre field of his mother's farm. He approached the men and told them, "You're off the reservation." They said, "We're glad you came along because we were wondering how we were going to get the railroad out of your hole." And they would have been building big bridges and everything else. The men invited Clyde into their Jeep, who showed them where they got off their boundary. They pulled their pins and said, "We need a man like you along to show us around." This is Back Creek. This is the Lehman family 7-acre field. This is Curtis Weaver's cat combine harvesting soybean. Harry Burkholder's Rocky Spring Farm was not included in that original boundary for the depot. This is the Rocky Spring farm by the Burkholder family. This house still stands, and I'll show you a picture of that. I believe this to be the old original house, but the second story taken off. Notice the ever-present straw stack in the barnyard, and a blocked saddle around the at that time. Back in history, there was a John Long of the Chambersburg congregation who bought this farm for his son David. He realized that 7 acres were slate, and he refused the farm. This is limestone area. David Long then sold this farm to Joseph Burkholder, and they farmed it along with their other farms. And Bishop John lived here, and as did Harry in 1922 when he got married. And this is where these girls grew up as well. But in this intervening time, whenever the government first came in, and this was not included in the depot, a man by the name of L.B. Smith approached Harry about leasing the farm because he wanted to check the limestone to see if it was good enough quality to make concrete, which would then be in turn sold to the Letterkenny Army Depot and the building of igloos. Well, Harry refused to rent his farm to Smith. Smith in turn asked to buy it, and Harry sold it to him. As it turned out, the limestone did not meet the criteria for making concrete, so Smith wanted to resell it to Harry, who turned him down. It's probably good he did. The farm was sold to Samuel Bricker, the old order river brother, horse and buggy Sam Bricker, who owned the house where I lived in, whose son Dan moved on to the farm. Now I'll get to another photo later. Dan Bricker was on a farm in Letterkenny, and he had to move out. This was on the edge of the depot, was not taken. So Sam Bricker bought this from Harry, or I guess L.B. Smith, yeah, and Dan moved on to it. Not so long after Dan was living there, he was plowing in the field one day in the spring of 1942 when government officials drove in and said, "We are taking this farm too." Dan pulled the rope on the plow, raising it out of the ground, and drove his tractor to the barn and parked it without finishing plowing. Well, what was the use? The government now owned it. And so Dan, his wife, and young son, Ray, moved in with his parents, the Sam Brickers, at Cheesetown, where we live today. I believe they wanted this for the water supply for the Rocky Spring. Not only did Harry refuse to rent his farm to someone who was going to use the stone for military-connected purposes, he even refused overnight lodging to his brother-in-law, Ben High, who came from Lancaster County as a welder in the construction of bridges and igloos. High was not even permitted to park his truck on Harry's property when he was in the area working for the military. What was going on here is the government put their jobs out on bids, and High's Welding won a bid for welding. Prior to this, Ben was in partnership with his brother Sanford in High Steel, a business that exists today. Ben was raised in the Mennonite church and was a member at the time of his marriage, but became involved in smoking and drinking. He came back to the Lord in the Mennonite church at George Brunk's tent meetings. Ben High became a supporter of the Brunk revivals, and his daughter Janet married George's son Gerald. Now let's stop and contemplate Harry's position here a little bit. Some may think that a little stern and stringent, and whenever his brother-in-law Ben High was in the area on a weekend and was not working for the military, yes, they were welcome at Harry's for overnight and for a meal, etc. But he did not like the connectedness to the military, which had its roots in a deep-seated conviction for biblical non-resistance and Christ's teaching in the New Testament that said we are not to resist evil. And Jesus said, if my kingdom were in this world, then would my servants fight. And we're not to kill. We are to turn the other cheek. And so in all of that, he would not have any involvement whatsoever with the military and the army. By the way, this putting jobs out on bids, there was a lot of work, a lot of construction needed done to get this ordnance depot up and going and built and put in place. And men like Paul and Bricker, I'm talking about Dwayne Bricker's father, Paul, bought a dump truck. And he did hauling whatever needed to be hauled for the government. And whenever Letterkenny was built, he kept his dump truck and maybe bought a high lift, dug out basements and did some other excavating work until their latest years they were laying blacktop driveways. But that's how he got his start in business, buying a dump truck and working for the government. This is the present day Burkholder, Rocky Spring farmhouse. I am outside, just right outside the fence. Admittingly, I zoomed that in and took that shot. You see the fence here, and this is a road within the depot. This is the Rocky Spring. This is the road inside the depot. This is the Rocky Spring Road. You can travel on that, but here is the Rocky Spring. The government built that building over the Rocky Spring. The historic Rocky Spring Presbyterian Church is just right up here on the hill. This is a list showing Strasburg members or Mennonites living in Letterkenny Township at the time of the takeover. I don't know that I'm going to take time to read over that. Maybe you should have a little time to glance over that. There was a gradual moving out process, but by April 1, 1942, everyone had to have vacated their properties. But on March 29, 27 inches of snow fell, requiring machines to open up the roads. And some folks, such as Howard Hoover, got an extension from the time in which they needed to be out of Letterkenny. This created lots of stress and emotional trauma as people had to give up their homes. And yes, I'm going to have to step down here. We get a closer look here. This is showing you on a map the Mennonite family. From over in here is Rocky Spring we're talking about, and Harry Burkholder and Dan Kaufman. Up in here is Pleasant Hall. Here is Upper Strasburg, and here was the John Hurst Place, David D. Hurst, Maple Grove, and this is the mountain here. Now here we have Victor Reif, Ralph Gokenauer, I thought I was going to be able to read that, but it's a little too... Here's where the Mennonite church was, in Rush Reif, Oak Grove School, Charles Bless, Matty Landis, Breckville, and the Daniel Bear's place was up here somewhere. Okay. This is a little bit closer shot. Victor Wright, Oak Grove School, Oak Grove United Brethren Church, Charles Bless, Strasburg Mennonite, Rush Wright, Catherine Burkholder. This is the Frogtown where they set up original headquarters. Sandra Bricker, Matty Landis, Pleasant Hill, Brother Christ, Paramount School, Ambrose Carpenter, Van Everly Farm, where Roy Yeagers lived, Daniel Kaufman, Harry Burkholder's Rocky Spring. If some of the rest of you would like to see your name there and would like to call it out here, feel free to do so.
First name be
Menser? He was down in this corner somewhere. Yeah, Menser. Okay, Old Letterkenny Post Office. Well, feel free to check out some of the larger maps that some of these folks brought along. If you've ever been on a cemetery tour, you will remember the backdrop the mountain gives to gentle rolling farmland. And in 2012, when we were back there on homestead tours and got to the Victor Reif site, a wife of a great-grandson said, "My, this would have been a beautiful farm." And is it any wonder that Victor Reif sat down in his newly built kitchen and wept when he received notice from the government that he would have to give it up to them? This is the Victor Reif house without the new kitchen. Victor Reif house with kitchen, just on this end here. And that is Victor Reif with his horse at the barn. Victor Reif's moved to Marion, to this farmhouse, which is owned by the Oaks family of Marion Auction Service. I think one of the family lives there. I'm not 100% sure right now. Maybe. Yeah, one of the family lives there. This is the Rush Reif place, next to the Strasburg Church. The Wayne Flagle family had bought this place and were making plans to move there when government came in, making plans to build a chicken house. Some say the chicken house wasn't built. Some maybe would say that the snow that fell March 27 caved the roof in. But anyway, those plans had to be given up. You had to walk away from them. This is the Rush Reif place today, with only that fence post left.
This is Brenda Wadel. Brenda here, Sam and Mary Jane's daughter, and her cousin Nelson Ocker, and the rest are Brenda's children, descendants of Rush Rife. This is the Roy Yeager farmhouse. This was owned by Ben Everly. Ben Everly's daughter was the mother of preacher Strite. Mark, your grandparents. Abe Strite's. Abe Strite's wife was Ben Everly's daughter, and I got my genealogy right. Anyway, this is the farmhouse. Now, I realize this is a black and white photo, but to me that is one beautiful old farmhouse. Notice a slate roof with 3 chimneys. This is either a summer kitchen. I'm going to assume it was a summer kitchen. Unless it was, it's old enough, I'd say that's a summer kitchen. And here is a lady here. I'm not sure what that building was about. Here is your fence. Here is a double porch. This is brick. This is weatherboard siding. I think that's a beautiful old farmhouse. And that's where they lived. Roy Yeager's moved to this farm on Boyer Mill Road, and that is Marlon Yeager's sale day. Brick in barn, but that barn was destroyed by fire a few summers ago. Harry Burkholder's moved to this farm behind Pleasant View Mennonite Church. This is the David D. Hurst farm in Letterkenny. I was also going to mention some prices if I have this written down here somewhere. As I recall, off the top of my head, they got something like $6,000 for that farm. And Roy Yeager, if I can back up a little bit, had just bought that farm 1 year prior to the government coming in. This is another shot of the David D. Hurst place. I can find out where I got to in my notes. The Strasbourg congregation wrestled with the future of their congregation. There were some who felt that due to a lack of unity between the ministry and the laity, the congregation would disband, and the families would be assimilated into other Franklin County Mennonite churches. On the question of where they would attend, Mouse Funk said that he would not go to the biggest church, he would go to Pleasant View. While it seemed like the majority of the congregation felt they would be absorbed by the other churches, there were those like Bishop Chris Martin who encouraged them to stay together. When he heard that one of his congregations might disband, he said, "No, we are not going to do that." Deacon Bricker also weighed in for keeping the congregation intact, who at one point asked one of his members, "What are you going to do with 2 ordained men?" And Bricker was successful in renting a vacant Church of the Brethren meeting house at Salem. And it is to be noted that the Strasbourg congregation is the only congregation church coming out of Letterkenny Armato Depot to remain intact as a congregation. And I would cite 2 reasons for that. That was the influence of their leaders in keeping them together. The second thing was not everyone had to move. I pointed that out earlier, what 3 families, at least along the Eatonville Road, who thought they might have to move initially didn't have to. So that helped, that not everyone had to move. This is the meeting house in Strasbourg, built 1903. A nice brick meeting house, and here you have horse sheds. It is thought that maybe Strasbourg was the only congregation to have horse sheds. It is also known that there was wealth in the congregation at that time to have built a nice meeting house like this in 1903. Oral tradition says that there were 3 men who each donated $1,000 to the building fund. $1,000 is nothing to sneeze at in 1903. One of those men reportedly being Hen Rife. The Rifes were successful farmers. Hen Rife able to give a farm to each of his children when they got married. This is the brick church at Salem, where the congregation worshiped 7.5 years. The last worship service held in the 1903 meeting house was communion, held in March of 1942.
Nothing outstanding about this gathering remains in the memory of those who would have been present. We can only imagine that as the emblems were served by Chris Martin and Sam Berger, that the tears flowed freely. Most likely, they lingered longer than normal after that last benediction. The following Monday evening, the Brotherhood met at the meeting house and removed the pulpit and benches, which were hauled the next day by Paul Flegel's truck to the rented church at Salem and stored in the basement. When the government took over, they numbered the buildings, which were put up for sealed bids. And here is the number on Victor Rice's new kitchen. And so you could go seal bids, you could go back to the office, and you could bid, knowing which number went with which building you could build on. And you could, by sealed bid, and then tear it down and build it elsewhere. Some of that went on. There were Amish who came out of Lancaster County, tore down maybe some 20 barns, and put them up at other places. This barn stayed close home along the Row Road. It was owned by a Baysore back toward Maple Grove. The bricks of the Roy Yeager farmhouse were used to build the Henry Martin house close to Pleasant View Church. You can tell by looking at the bricks on that house that they are older bricks. This is Joe Musser's house along the Kiefer Road. Part of that kitchen came from Victor Rice, and there was another part of that house came from Ezra Burkholder's. Ironically, the government later used the 1903 meeting house for war equipment storage. Within the same four walls, where peace and love to our fellow man had been preached, were stored items used to kill one's enemies. And this is the Strasburg Church after the government had it. Note here the ramp they have built. They tore a big hole on this side of the wall so they could get in and out. This is a shed built by the government. Here is still horse sheds there yet. This is the front door, and here is a stone plaque, built 1859, rebuilt 1903. They also tore away the dirt here, so you can't get in the main door there. This is another shot of the same thing. Here again we have our ramp, and another building built by the government on the other side. Now let's take a look at some of the people who were involved in this. This is my grandmother, Grace Lehman Wadel. This is, and two of her sisters here and over here. This is Aunt Marion, married Harry Funk. And this is Aunt Janet. She still lives, married Artie Martin. We visited her the first Sunday in May and got a few little tidbits from her. She said that this was my grandmother's and Martha's car. They owned a car together. Now, I'm not real up on all that old stuff, but to me that looks like a Chevrolet. This is the Miles Funk family and Stella. This is Sam and Harry. Those two were Mennonites. The rest of the family joined the Salem United Brethren. This is Lawrence, and this is Stanley. Stanley, after a stint in the Army, went west to Iowa in the corn harvest, where he met his wife and joined the Old Order River Brethren Church and was a preacher. I remember just a few occasions when Stanley came around to Strasburg and had the opening devotional. And this is the daughters Susan and Evan. I'm not sure which is which. Victor Wright family. It's Merle and the twins, Ruth and Janet. Ruth was the first wife of Harold Eby, and Janet is the wife of John Alker. This is Mary Jane, married to Sam Funk. This is Wayne and Ruth Flegel. This is Alan Flegel's parents. Ruth was the daughter of Deacon Sam Berger. This is Deacon Sam Berger, Alan Flegel's grandfather, and his second wife, Anna, was it? Or she was a Wadel. And this is their daughter, Anna, who became Mrs. Harvey Shank. This is Harry Burkholder family. Harry and Mary, and Yuma, Clyde, and
Catherine and Mullen Lehman, and Anna, and I'm sorry I forget his first name, Melvin Musser and Anna. And this is the folks who lived in the house. We're back to the old Rocky Spring farmhouse. It still stands. And these folks invited their family back for a meal because they had, one time lived in the house. Traditionally, this house was used as the chaplain's residence, and I don't know if he was this fellow's chaplain or not. And this is Clyde and Yuma's youngest child, Yumi. We have everyone there. Now, because if you give me a little time, I can get you most of the names that's on here. I'm going to have to get a little straighter to the photo. This is Clyde Lehman, Ruth Dolores Bless, Mrs. Max Clugston. Mary was a youngest child of Daniel Eversole's. I pointed out the Daniel Eversole farm next to the Strasburg Church. Two of her other sisters were along today, Mrs. Newton and Ellen Evie. Now back over here, this is Archie Lehman, his father David L. Lehman, Charles Bless, who was responsible also for taking the petition around, Mary Jane Funk. That might be Sam. I'm having a little trouble with that one in there. This is Harry Burkholder. This is one of Bishop John Burkholder's daughters. That is Barbara. Okay, we saw her picture with her mother earlier. This is Merle Wright. This is Mrs. Abe Strite. Mark Strite that's here this evening, that should be your grandmother there. This is my grandmother Grace. This is another Burkholder girl. Emma, married Henry Sollenberger. This is Catherine Lehman. Paul Stewart. Mrs. Oscar Delp, sticking in there. Aunt Martha. Yoma Lehman. Alice Lehman. Mrs. Newt Timmons, Ella Lehman, Anna Musser, Mrs. Wilhurst, and Mrs. Wilhurst here, and Ellen Evie, married to one-armed David Evie. Notice that they're carrying around the stone that was above the door, built 1858, and rebuilt 1903. I guess I'm starting to tell my age a little bit, but I do remember most of those folks. That represents a nice cross-section of the Mennonite families who lived on Depot. This is another photo. This is the one that was on the poster handout. I'm assuming that this is a Lancaster group. A Lancaster touring group. This is Martin Ressler, the song leader, who donated some 6,000 books to the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society. Here's Roy Showalter. Here is Peter Zacconi. Peter, is that you? Can you tell us anything about this day, Peter? Peter Zacconi. I thought I saw that he was here. Okay, yeah, there he is. You remember this day, Peter? Okay. Was it a Lancaster Historical Society? Lancaster Historical Society tour. I know that there were times when Clyde Lehman, one time at least, Clyde Lehman had John Ruth back there. He's not on this photo, and maybe he was the one behind the camera, I don't know. Lamar and Lois Mast are where? Far right. These folks here? Lamar and Lois Mast, who have Mast Hawk Press? Yes, okay. Let's go back over here. I'm not sure about these folks. This is historian Daniel R. Lehman. That may be his wife Margaret, I'm not sure. This is Deacon Clarence Coons at Dillard Church. Who? Jay Coons where? Oh, his dad. Okay, all right, gotcha. This is Clyde Lehman and his sons Daniel Lehman and Claire Lehman. This is Noah Wadel and Mary. Harry Burkholder, Glenn Hurst. I'm getting stuck. Roy Showalter, Roy Yeager, Ada. All right, and the new marker is built. Now let me show you some other farm sites. This is Joseph Burkholder, Old Order River Brethren. The Joe Burkholder that's with us this evening, this is his grandparents' place back close Kiefer Store. This is Ed Burkholder Farm. Joe Burkholder that's with us this evening grew up here until he was like 5 years old. This was 143 acres and he got $8,724. This is another view of Ed Burkholder Farm. Let's see, Cora Heckman, they were telling me you worked for Ed Burkholder's. You don't remember that? Okay. This is Earl Mayer's place. At least that's what the photo was marked, Earl Mayer's. This is Ezra Burkholder. He had sold this place in 1936 to River Brother Sandberger. And this, I'm assuming, is where Dan lived when the government came in, then he moved to Rocky Spring. This is the Dan Burker Farm, 130 acres, $8,885. It does appear that the government treated churches a little better. Charlesburg got 6,000, and comparing, 2.5 acre church lot to some of these farms. Yes, Ms. Greavy?
What did they have to buy, what they have to pay for what they bought?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Maybe some of you answer this question. You know what the farmers were bringing when they had to move out. Okay, that's another research item. This is the marker that was built at Strasburg Church. This is Preacher Harry Funk, Clyde Lehman, Paul Stewart, the Paul Stewart we know, his father Paul Stewart, and Harry Burkholder and David Lehman. This marker was built in 1978. When Clyde learned that he would have to write a letter to the commander, who readily gave his permission, they got ready-made concrete free from anchor brands. 2 of the bricks is original. The rest of the brick is left over from building Clyde's house. And prominent in the marker is this, which was above the door of the 1903 meeting house. Mennonite Church, built 1859, rebuilt 1903. And Clyde had this engraved by Shaw Memorials. Strasburg Mennonite Church stood at this site, acquired by the U.S. government in 1942. And that concludes my presentation.